And what has been a problem for you doesn't always have to be a problem for you. That when you call upon the one presence and the one power to live through as you, and you claim it, you actually claim it as you, it has a place, a way to express through you. And you are not limited by the past. You're not limited by what others have done. You're not limited by your habits of thinking, because now you have invited a new way of being. There's a phrase inside this book. It basically says, we're not who we think we are. Who we are, what we think we are. So change the way you think about yourself. Let that maxi me become your new identity, and the mini me can change. Today we're starting a book study. That book study is on this book called Practical Metaphysics. Practical Metaphysics is a book written over a lecture that Eric Butterworth did in a series of talks and classes. And it lays out in as clear a way as I think anybody has the 5 unity principles and how the world works. And from that, I would like to start at the beginning, which is pretty much about the nature of God. Before I do that, I want to remind you that on Wednesday nights we have meditation here. It starts at 7 o'clock in the green room here. 6 o'clock? And Michael Gadway, our excellent minister who's sitting in the back helping us out back there today, is the guy who leads that. And it has been something that people have found quite meaningful, because he takes you through some of the practices that he is very familiar with through the Vedic tradition. So I hope you'll try it. Let me go back to the book. So the book, let me just speak about the book in general. We choose a book study twice a year, and I'm the one who finally makes a final call, but I ask everybody what their opinion is. What would you like to hear this time? What's important? What do you think the consciousness of the church is ready for or needs? And we came to this book largely because there are a lot of people coming to Unity now that have not a great deal of experience with Unity, and this explains what Unity is. It explains it by also inviting you to transform your life. So it's not just a discourse on what the nature of the philosophy of Unity is, it's an invitation to be yourself at a higher level. Along those lines, I'd like to talk to you about the architecture of the universe, or God and you, and how an image you might put in your mind and replace the old God image might work. Let me start by saying this. First of all, I don't think God's a being in the normal way that we think of beings, having a shape, a form, an in and an out. But instead, God is, I'll use the old way of saying it, God, according to Unity, is a principle. Now, I've never liked that because I didn't really understand it. But if you think about the idea that God is everywhere, principles are everywhere. The principle of mathematics is everywhere the same. And you cannot diminish any of it by using it a lot, or you could not use it at all, and it would still be the same. The principle used or unused doesn't change. The principle of God is sort of the same way. If you use your full God potential, you have not diminished anything. If you don't use it, you have not changed it either. You could also think of this as a non-physical event in which the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. There is no distance from this idea that we're going to call God. And I have refrained often from speaking using that traditional language of God, and I think we could just start with the idea that maybe we call it presence, that the presence is everywhere present. And it is not diminished by getting bigger, nor is it lesser the smaller the space you have it. And as a matter of fact, just like all the principles, they are in the very smallest spaces in the universe as well as the largest. And one of the things that happens to be in the universe is you. And so this God presence is in you, but not just as a little spark, which is a common way of saying it, but rather as you. Because it turns out this principle invades, controls, is part of, is everything. And it's not just the principle of mathematics, but also the principle of love, that love is everywhere and it is in you as you. That power is in there, wisdom is in there, the ability to create is in there, the ability to transform is in there. It is all within it. And there is almost nothing in the physical world that exactly replicates this. But one of the images that is often used is the acorn. So an acorn is just a small little thing, but an acorn can grow into a tree because the potential is within the acorn for it to be one of the largest trees in this part of the state. The acorn doesn't look like a tree, but when set in the right conditions, becomes that tree. And so it is with your potential. You are like the acorn. You don't look like what you could be in the long run, in the circumstances of your life, the way you have fully have expressed to this point. You have not fully reached the fullness of yourself. You may be unfolding and you may be happy with the way it is, or you may be not happy with the way it is, but there's so much potential in you that cannot be expressed at the level which we are. And so the invitation of metaphysics is not so much to have a philosophy that you can turn to, but a practice that you can use, something that will allow you to expand it and become who you really could be, who you really are in potential. Now, part of the way of explaining this, and I'm granted going through the metaphors relatively quickly, but remember the movie? It was one of those movies where there was me and then there was mini-me. Are you familiar with that, me and mini-me? And I think a way of thinking of your potential is that, and I think of myself often this way, that I'm the mini-me of the me, right? That there is a transcendent, a grander, a full-on, magnificent me, of which I am the avatar. This is the avatar. My identity is so often with this piece, this one, mini-me. But there is no real difference, or I won't say difference, there's no separation between mini-me and me. Oh, this is not supposed to be that serious. And and so, when I'm in need, which happens at least every Sunday morning about this time, when I'm in need, I invite me to work through mini-me. And with that, there seems to be a deeper sense of awareness or vocabulary or ideas, things that flow together that I wouldn't have thought of before. They come in as, and they come out as me. And I think I'm doing it to some degree, although I'm quite aware that this is not the full author or architect of everything I'm saying. And I'm sure you must have had the same experience when you were in need of more of yourself, that more surprised you as it came through, and it just came through very easily. Everything unfolded because now you were in tune with the big you and not the little you. And so the mini you was beginning to experience what it is like to explore the potential that the you has. And the volume of that might be a way of expressing it. You could imagine a transcendent, let's say, we'll call it an archangel worth of presence that would love to be expressed as you, But habitual thoughts and limiting thoughts have kept you as you are. That they have made me into a mini-me and say, this is all that I am. Did you ever say something like, I'm just me, right? You can't ask that much of me, that's just me here. And the philosophy of metaphysics says you can hold that thought and keep to that thought, but it will limit you. It will keep you from being me, you'll just be a mini-me. And you'll be a slice of all that is possible. In potential, you have a full circle of who you could be, but you have chosen to be an arc. And I think, this is quite understandable. Our parents were just an arc. Our society asked for expression of just an arc. We went to grammar school, where you had to sit in a desk and put your head down and take a nap for 15 minutes. You were not really invited to be your full self. You were invited to be a citizen that would go to work in a factory, which is what our school system was based on. So it's not surprising that we have a limited view, but even if all those barriers had been changed, the likelihood that we were not expressing the full of who we are is most likely. Because to fully express who you are requires a great deal of intention and a great willingness to allow yourself to be changed. And it's comfortable being who you are, right? You know how to go home, you know where you're going to live, you know who your friends will be, you know all that. It's kind of a package. You got it. And if you don't think your friends affect you, they say you want to know how much you will make, take an average of your 5 closest friends, and that's probably what you're making. But there's also the exploration of all the possibilities are limited by the crowd you stand with. And that's why I'm really glad to be with you. Because you're willing to explore what it is to be deeply human and deeply spiritual at the same time, to know your feelings and to be able to be sensitive and compassionate, but also to transcend who you have been to this point. And that's in part why you're here today, is that you know there's more that you could be. There's an expanded self that is already there in potential, and you're not going to have to make it, you're just going to have to draw it out. Remember the old jukeboxes? The old jukeboxes with the vinyl records, and you would punch in a couple of numbers and letters, and then out would come a record, and it would flap down and start to play. You could consider that your potentials, that you are the whole jukebox, the you, and the mini you is the record that's playing today. I'm really struggling to find the perfect metaphor for who you are. Because who you are isn't limited by what you have seen. And it's not in the traditional language. We talk about the Christ's presence. The Christ's presence is this you. That Christ's presence is so much more than who we are that in many ways the tradition of the Christian church was to say Jesus was not who we are. He was different. He was the Son of God. Look at him. He had this full arc and full expression of the divine, and we have just a slice. And that's exactly right. But the full arc of who he is what he said we were. These things I have done, you can do as well. Are ye not gods? If, let's say, for the moment, things are not going well for you, and you have been working at making them different and not gotten very far, or you have an illness that seems to be quite pressing, or finances are going, or your relationship, I can speak honestly about relationships because I'm notoriously bad at them. Except relationships are a perfect example of how things can change. Because what usually ruins a relationship for me is trying to make it into something, rather than letting it be what it is. And then finding a way to engage that with an open heart in such a way that whatever is there can be met with love and acceptance. And so the love and acceptance is the real secret to transforming my relationship with relationship. Now imagine how little that would need to change except in me. The person in front could be anybody. They would not have to be perfect. It would only be me who would need to change. Right? And you can imagine that if your big self was involved big enough and you knew yourself as that big enough, nothing could threaten you. No one could say you're not good enough and that cause you to close your heart down, or no one could say I'm angry with you and you find that you're afraid, or no one could do something that would cause resentment, because at that moment that you are in touch with the whole of who you are, the potential for who you are, your heart would stay open. And in the context of your heart staying open, making a nest for the person, could there not be a great relationship within that? The potential was always there, but it was blocked by my inability to expand to the size in which anything could be open and loved just as it is. And when I tap into the one presence, one power as love itself, and I recognize that my identity is not the mini-me, but the maxi-me, when I take that attitude, then anybody could be anybody in my presence, and there would still be love and acceptance. Take that to any place you want. Take any part of your life to that level, in which you could live in a place of open-heartedness and acceptance in the face of disease or loss or whatever. And I think you could easily pull in a different record and play it, because you're now living in a different way. You're living from a different level of being. And that's what the metaphysics is about, is to get you to recognize that the one presence and one power, which is what unity calls the divine or God, the one presence, one power, is everywhere, equally. And if it's everywhere equally, it's everywhere as you, exactly. And that you are the example, the expression of this one presence, one power. And what has been a problem for you doesn't always have to be a problem for you. That when you call upon the one presence and the one power to live through as you, and you claim it, you actually claim it as you, it has a place, a way to express through you. And you are not limited by the past. You're not limited by what others have done. You're not limited by your habits of thinking, because now you have invited a new way of being. There's a phrase inside this book. It basically says, we're not who we think we are. Who we are, what we think we are. So change the way you think about yourself. Let that maxi-me become your new identity. And the mini-me can change. The expression of the divine can change because you have adopted a new identity. and have allowed the power of the one presence to flow into you and to bring a new pattern forth. Not the total arc, maybe, but a new slice. The architecture of the universe could be like this. Everywhere present is the presence. And everywhere there is a presence, there's the whole of the presence, with all the power, all the wisdom, all the love necessary for anything. And so though it may look like on the surface that we're separate and we're weak and small and limited, and that includes how much love we can give because we're afraid about the exchange rate. The whole of God is everywhere present. And that brings with it all of God. And since you're somewhere inside that whole thing, that means everywhere you are, God is, with the whole of it available to you. Now that's something worth thinking about. And that is the beginning of this book, and also the beginning of deeper wisdom. Because it's such a daring thought that the Christ that Jesus was, that same Christ lives inside you as you. That the greatest person that ever lived has essentially the Christ presence with him, but also so does the least. And all of us in between. That potential, because God is everywhere and all of God is wherever God is. Just as all of math is everywhere in the universe, just as potential in the acorn is always there, whether we see it or not. And just as the mini-me is connected to the maxi-me, whatever image you take, it's an invitation for you to own something grander than we normally see in ourselves, and to claim it as you. And as a practice, I was reading one of my favorite books. If you want to practice something for a week until you get back here, practice this statement. It's a statement that Jesus used. It's an I am statement. And then one way of accessing the transcendent is to recognize that the I am is code for the transcendent, for what is possible, for the Christ self. Name it as you wish. Jesus said this, I am the resurrection and the life. Try that on as a thought, as an invitation to expand your consciousness, to match that thought. You're not making it so, it's already so. That the Christ in you is your resurrection and life. That wherever you are now can be transcended, and life can be more abundant within you. I am, which is the self that is connected with the one presence. I am the resurrection and the life. And then live from that understanding for the next week. And see if things don't begin to feel a little bit different. Okay, let us pray. I am the resurrection and the life. Simple words, big meaning. Not designed to be one person in history, but all of us. I am the resurrection and the life, because you are the one presence in evidence in the place where you sit. And if that doesn't ring, try this. I am unconditional love. And if that doesn't sit, find something that does. Something that lifts you, that affirms you, so that you might realize who you really are. I am. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.